When we say do your job, we mean just do your job, okay? And that also applies to Donald Trump. Because right now, he's doing things that a lot of people really didn't ask for, right? For the most part. A lot of people were concerned about the economy. There's some of the culture war issues that his base, I think, were concerned about as well. But the number one driver for people was the economy, right? But let me show you what he's doing now. This one is getting, I think actually this is not getting enough information or enough coverage as it should receive. Let's get into this story here, ladies and gentlemen. The Trump administration ends segregated facilities banned in federal contracts. Now we're going to dive into this because I told you, like, there's things that you can do, and then there's the law. So we'll get into what the law actually says. So you can see the picture there where it said for color only, yada, yada. Let's get into this. The Trump administration has announced the federal government will no longer unequivocally prohibit contractors from having segregated restaurants, waiting rooms, and drinking fountains. Okay, so let's just pause there first, right? So first of all, we have state laws and we have federal laws. So just keep that in mind. Is this something that you think he's actually going to be able to do and get around the law? No. Doesn't mean that he won't tell people to try to implement this. But also, I told you the number one issue was the economy. And I think we all know that when you look back on history, segregation is also costly, right? Because if you're having separate everything, separate water fountain, that's another water fountain, separate bathroom, that's another bathroom, like these things do add up, right? So just again, think about these things that he's focusing on that obviously, I think this is symbolism, and I'll get into that. Why it matters. The change announced last month in an overlooked public memo is a symbolic move. First reported by NPR and comes after President Trump revoked President Lyndon Johnson's decades-old order diversity and affirmative action practices in the federal government. Here's the big picture. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as many state laws, still make segregated facilities illegal in all businesses, including federal contractors. So there's what Trump tries to do or thinks that he can do, and then there is the law. And this can cause a lot of issues. I know this is just for federal contractors, but the reality is, like, this can cause a lot of problems. And I'm thinking about, again, costs. Like, why waste time with court costs? Why do all this? I believe that Donald Trump is doing this as a sign, a signal that he is sending to a certain portion of his base, right? A certain portion of that Trump base that does want this, right? Like the people that are part of MAGA that are racist, the people that are part of MAGA that want separate facilities, or that say that segregation is better for them, or that they don't want to be in the same facility or same space with people of different colors, etc. Right? I feel like he's trying to send a signal to them as a, look, you voted for me, this is for you, right? Like, but he knows that the law prohibits this, so he can't just overrule the law. Also, don't forget about Supreme Court decision, like, as well. So let's continue on here. It goes on to say, yes, but critics say the recent change sends a message about the government's priorities and potentially eliminates a crucial enforcement tool. The change follows the Trump administration reinterpretation of the civil rights era laws to focus on anti-white racism rather than discrimination against people of color. So yeah, man, again, separate facilities. It's just, oh my God. Talk about like going backwards, right? Like, it's 2025. This is stupid. This is a waste of time. So when I say do your job, the number one thing right now should be getting the economy back on track, ending the wars, which doesn't look like that's happening either, right? Like, that should be the priority, not things like this. I mean, it's just under Biden's administration, I made the similar criticism. He wasn't trying to do this, but similar criticism where I felt like Joe Biden was choosing to prioritize things that didn't need to be prioritized at that point in time. So the number one priority right now is the economy. That should be the focus. Let's continue on. It says here, zoom in, a public memo from General Services Administration issue said that the change was needed after Trump revoked LBJ's 60-year executive order requiring federal contractors to refrain from employment discrimination. The memo also addresses Trump's executive order on gender identity. A clause in the federal acquisition regulation called FAR said contractors can't maintain or provide for its employees any segregated facilities. So, I mean, this is a waste of time. It's also ridiculous. And I gotta say this needs to also be a message for Black Americans that voted for Donald Trump. Because of all the actions that you've seen Trump do so far, I haven't seen Donald Trump do anything specifically for the Black community, which is what I tried to warn people about at that point in time. I understand Joe Biden was bad and is an asshole. I understand Kamala was also bad, right? But at the same time, I don't know why people thought that Trump was going to do something for Black Americans, right? So keep that in mind. It also goes on to say here, the memo stated that when issuing new solicitations or contracts, agency could no longer include the clause about prohibition of segregated facilities. FAR defines segregated facilities as work areas, restaurants, drinking fountains, transportation, housing, and others. So literally, like, this is like trying to go back to the days of like segregated buses and this is just, it's ridiculous, it's foolish, it's a waste of time. And I also feel like it's a distraction, right? Like I said, a lot of people haven't covered the story, but we need to talk about it because, again, that's his way of sending a message to a certain portion, because not all of them are this way, but a certain portion of his base saying, look, I see you, I got you, even though he knows this is against the law. Now, I want to show you something else because someone sent this to me. It might have been Roger Meadows who sent this to me, and that is Phil Scott. And I want you to see what Phil Scott said about this. This is really important. Listen to this.
If you folks, go ahead and do it. Go ahead. I promise you're not going to get the reaction you think you're going to get. You're not going to get it. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. If y'all decide to ever do that, now we're talking about federal contracting here, but I'm saying if y'all ever decide to do it, you will spark the greatest business creation, innovation, and greatest support out of Black people within our own community like you've never seen before.
Bingo. Because here's the thing, okay? Black Americans, we are a significant part of the consumer base. So to Phil Scott's point here, if that were to happen, things would be very, very different. Very, very different. Because then what you would have is that Black people would prioritize spending money at Black-owned businesses. And we'll bring up some other things too. Because the reality is when you look back on things and if you've never lived in like, an all Black neighborhood, let me tell you something, okay? So like, particularly in a lot of like the all Black neighborhoods, especially the ones that are in like, inner cities, urban areas, a lot of those businesses are not Black owned. That changed over the decades. A lot of those businesses are not owned by Black people. So like, for example, I was talking about this. I went on to Marcus Farrell's show the other day. And, one of the things we were talking about is like how we can strengthen and help the Black community, right? Check this. My grandma's neighborhood my parents grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Guess who owns the businesses in the neighborhood? Again, it's an all Black neighborhood, but the convenience store on the corner of my grandma's block is owned by a Korean guy, a Korean family. The sub place across the street is owned by a Korean family. The beauty supply store is owned by a Korean family. You get where I'm going with this, right? So a lot of these businesses in predominantly or all Black neighborhoods are not Black owned. That means that if something like this were to pop off, that means those businesses, to Phil Scott's point, if this expanded, those businesses wouldn't make any money. Because let's keep it real. Black people that live in those neighborhoods are going to have to go outside of the community to go shop at the Black businesses. And let's be honest about this. Not too many people that live outside of those neighborhoods are going to be willing to come into those neighborhoods to support those businesses. So he has a point. So that's the thing. That's exactly what would happen. Let's continue.
That would motivate Black people to shop with each other, do business with each other, and finally circulate the Black dollar in the Black community. The moment one of y'all do that, Black folks remove the trillions of dollars that we spend every year out of y'all businesses and put it right back into our own and in our own communities. That would be the biggest financial mistake y'all could have ever made. You understand? If you told us today we couldn't go to the same bathroom with y'all, that would be a good thing. Go ahead and do it because our bathrooms will be cleaner. I know that much.
So it wouldn't work in the way that people think that it would work. And that probably could like inspire more Black Americans to say, you know what, we need to start I'm going to start my own business. I've been thinking about it. I'm good now, the time to do it. But the reality is, when you look back on it during that time of segregation, that's what was happening. Now, I have to look into this to see when those Black businesses, and some of them were burned to the ground, but the ones that weren't, like, when did other businesses come into Black neighborhoods, right? Because like I said, in Baltimore, which there's a lot of Black people in Baltimore, in my grandma's old neighborhood, all the businesses in that neighborhood are not Black owned. All of them. And it was that way when I was a kid. So we have to look in to see like when this happened, right? But something else that he said, I want you to hear this as well.
Black people, affirmative action, and all these different laws, Fair Housing Act, all of this. Oh, it's discriminating against white people. This is what they're saying. Well, why would you have a Fair Housing Act for? Let's go back to the intention of Fair Housing Act. When Black folks tried to get a home, they were getting denied for the simple color of our skin. So they say, okay, we got to come up with the Fair Housing Act because Black people was not getting their just due. When it came to affirmative action, the reason why that happened, when Black people put their application, it was widely noted that they were putting a Black stamp on it and throwing it away or throwing it to the side, letting people know that's a Black person that applied. So
that's also why some people in the Black community are I want to say tend to be, but some will be more mindful when naming their babies. Because it is true. Like if a lot of times, if you have a name that people will say sounds like a Black name, yeah, a lot of times like your stuff might be pushed right over to the side, right? So just think about that. But the point that Phil brings up here is really important because when people are complaining, well, why do we have, Fair Housing Act? Why do we have affirmative action? Why do we have these things in place? This isn't fair. This isn't, equal. The reason why those things were put in place is because Black people were looked over. Black people were dismissed. We weren't getting fair housing. And we can talk about housing another time because there's a lot that can go into that. But we weren't getting fair housing. We weren't getting those things. That's why those provisions were implemented. That's why it's there. See, people want to talk about, oh, it shouldn't be there, but they don't want to talk about why it was there. It's like they don't want to talk about why it was there to begin with. So the reality is, this is not something that should be a focus right now when over 67% of the population is living paycheck to paycheck in this country, when the economy is still in shit, when people are still struggling, when the homelessness rate continues to increase and has increased over the past 10 years. This should not be priority. So when I say do your job, That's what I mean. Do your job. This is ridiculous. Number one focus should be the economy. I said the same damn thing when Biden was president. When Biden won in 2020, the moment he resumed, he took office in 2021, I said, okay, fix this economy. Because you guys got to remember that was right during the pandemic. So we were still dealing with all of that. Okay, fix this economy. Let's stop focusing on this nonsense. And I'm saying the same thing right now. But right now, Donald Trump is choosing to do this. And again, like I said, he's doing it to send a message to a certain portion of his base. That's why he's doing that. Should not be the first. Number one, it shouldn't be done. Number two, he knows it can't happen. It's against the law. It's a waste of time. This is just ridiculous. And that's why I say this country is a clown show. We literally do live in a cartoon. I mean, it's just, you go to other countries sometime and you're like, are they even like dealing with these issues? No. Because people in their countries, what do they have? Healthcare, free college, things like that. But I want to show you what it would look like, because you got to look at the buying power, right? Black consumers empowered by selfless spending. Watch this. This is 2022. You only got to go into the first paragraph right here, folks. Black consumers possess more power and influence in the retailing marketplace than ever before, given their growing buying power and population rate. In addition to especially high engagement with social media activism and corporate social responsibility, which has been largely shaping industries from inside out over the past 2 years. So people have to understand this. Yes, Black people, we do have buying power in this country. You see how quickly Target's stock plummeted when that strike started. You see how quickly that happened. So yeah, we do have buying power. Not something that should be a focus. Definitely should not be pushing something like this. This is freaking ridiculous. Need to focus on the economy and fixing the economy. And that should be number one priority. So do your job. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.